Looking across now to John Herbst, who's a former US ambassador to Ukraine. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. I mean, just looking at, the way things have gone these last few months and President Trump's diplomatic overtures to Moscow, it doesn't seem like Moscow's been at all receptive to any of them. Do you think President Trump's been wasting his time?
I felt all along that Putin was not interested in peace. He wants to subjugate Ukraine, and since Ukraine will not surrender, he wants to continue the war. President Trump gave Putin the benefit of the doubt. Already, President Trump entered office in late January. Already by April, even supporters of his, the editorial writers at the New York Post or the Wall Street Journal were pointing out that Putin was playing Trump, and they were right. But it took President Trump a little bit more time to see that. But he has seen it. And I think what he did yesterday was very strong, very good.
Yeah, and all the while, President Trump's been trying to broker a ceasefire. Russia's been launching really record numbers of drones and missiles at Ukraine these last few months. I mean, what message is Moscow sending Washington?
Complete disregard of the United States' position and President Trump himself. It's really quite remarkable. I thought Putin would be a little bit smarter than that. But the fact that, right after several phone calls, not just the last one, Russia sent even more drones and even more missiles into Ukraine, was demonstrating that President Trump was achieving nothing in his calls. And finally, President Trump got mad. It's also worth noting that, before, in 2018, when then Syrian dictator Assad was threatening to use chemical weapons on his civilians, Trump warned him not to do it. And Assad did use CW, and Trump took out a good portion of Syria's Air Force because he was personally appalled by the suffering of the Syrian civilians. The Russians should have remembered that before they began to amp up their strikes on not just civilians per se in Ukraine, but maternity wards, hospitals, schools, etc.
So I think you've basically answered my next question, which is, why the U-turn by President Trump? Why has he now decided that giving Patriot missiles to Ukraine is the right course of action? I mean, it sounds very much along the lines of what you were just saying now.
I would not overstate the Patriot dimension of this because we have provided Patriots, we've been part of a process providing Patriots to Ukraine before. But it's the strong condemnation of what Putin is doing, the questioning of his motivation, the first time now that this new president, or second-time president in this term, is talking about sending billions of dollars worth of weapons, including, as he himself said, top-of-the-line weapons. And while Trump himself only mentioned Patriots, Secretary General Rutte, who was meeting with Trump at that time, referred to missiles as well. In other words, offensive weapons. And you undoubtedly saw the story in the Financial Times overnight that Trump asked Zelensky, could he strike Moscow or Petersburg? And Zelensky said yes, with American weapons.
I mean, this is all quite risky for President Trump politically, and I'm talking about from a domestic perspective. There are quite a lot of people in the president's support base, the MAGA group, who feel a bit betrayed by this decision. I'm just wondering how audible they are and how much of a threat you think they pose to President Trump domestically.
I follow this very closely. I think what you just stated is a quote-unquote urban legend and not quite accurate. You're right that as a candidate, Trump talked about in a way that suggested minimalizing American engagement abroad, especially military engagement. And a lot of his most prominent supporters bought into that. And people with real influence and access with Trump held those views. I'm thinking of Tucker Carlson. I'm thinking of Elon Musk. But also within the administration, Tulsi Gabbard, and maybe even Secretary of Defense Hegseth, and certainly with regard to anything except China, Undersecretary of Defense Colby. But look what's happened to those voices. Trump made the smart decision last month to use America's famous bunker buster bombs following Israel's successful strike on Ukrainian nuclear facilities to finish the job off. Tucker Carlson criticized Trump explicitly. We heard their newspaper reporting that Gabbard and Hegseth weren't too enthusiastic about this. Trump slammed Carlson, who then healed too. And we didn't hear much from Gabbard or Hegseth after that. So Trump demonstrated that he can do something which, quote unquote, MAGA world might not like. And I won't just say get away with it, but establish that he's the guy who determines MAGA world's foreign policy. It's quite interesting that you had some serious pushback regarding Iran, but really none when Trump overrode the foolish decision by the Pentagon to pause arms to Ukraine. And then when Trump made this very dramatic announcement yesterday. We're not hearing those voices we heard before. So Trump really makes these decisions, and he has very little vulnerability with his base on these decisions.
Yeah, the people I was thinking of were, in fact, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Steve Bannon, who are very much of the opinion this isn't an American problem. This is a European problem, they say. Let Europe deal with it. That seems to be their argument, and that's what we've been hearing. And President Trump not seeing it that way anymore.
I think that they are marginal figures when it comes to foreign policy. I mean, Bannon's been on the outs with Trump since the first term. And if you recall, Trump gave a more or less green light to the American aid package for Ukraine April of last year. And Marjorie Taylor Greene was fulminating against that. As for that matter, and this is ironic, then Senator Vance. And Trump told MTG to calm down. You know, you're a nice lady, but I make the decisions here, ma'am. So I don't see that as very significant. Again, I think that Trump determines these things. We haven't heard much criticism of Trump's very bold announcement yesterday. And again, that demonstrates he's got control of his own movement.
Some critics of President Trump, including outside the United States, say, you know, on the face of it, what we've seen these last 6 months is something of an erratic policy towards Ukraine. Should we support Ukraine? Should we not support Ukraine? Attempts to engage with President Putin. Underneath all of that, though, Ambassador, do you see a strategy as having been present all the while?
I can't be certain of that. Many of my colleagues felt that when Trump won the election last November, he was going to wind up essentially selling out Ukraine to the Kremlin. I always thought that was wrong because doing that would be a demonstration of profound weakness. And Trump is not a weak man, and he certainly doesn't conceive of himself as a weak man. But he wanted to get along with Putin. That is very clear. He set, I would say, a fatuous goal back in February or early March of a reset with Russia, the very bad Obama bad idea, which didn't work then. And he, through his pal Witkoff, tried to make that happen. But Trump Trump understood, even as he was seeking better relations with Moscow, that if for better relations with Moscow, he had to let Putin do what he wanted in Ukraine. That was a very bad bargain, not least for Trump's own reputation.
Just lastly,
that's what we've seen happen.
Okay, so to sum up, I mean, these last 6 months, and it's obviously a very difficult nut to crack for all presidents, including President Trump's predecessor. I mean, has anything been achieved these last 6 months? Because from where I sit, I haven't seen a single concession from the Russian side.
Okay. First, Trump achieved a lot with Iran. And that kind of set the stage for the very clear policy direction he's moved in since that time. And no, Putin has not offered any concessions, and that's exactly the point. And again, many of my colleagues in the analytical community understood that Putin was not going to offer any concessions. Most of them felt, as I already mentioned, that Trump was going to go along with that. There were a few who, with me, my colleagues Dan Fried, Bill Taylor, understood that, I mean, Trump could go that way, but it would not turn out well for him if he did. And for that reason, we held the hope that this could turn out right. But we always expected that Putin would make it hard for Trump to hand over Ukraine by refusing to make any real concessions. And that's probably the reason why, the principal reason why, we've seen Trump stake out this firm, this Reagan-esque peace through strength position, which is what his announcement yesterday was.
OK, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Really appreciate it. Always a pleasure talking to you. John Herbst, former US Ambassador to Ukraine. Thank you, Ambassador.